There we go. Good afternoon and welcome back, everybody. Welcome back to the Beit Midrash. I missed y'all the last couple of weeks. It was weird. Like I'm sitting here, like 12 o'clock rolls around. I'm like, still in services, but I missed you guys. I missed teaching and learning with y'all. So welcome back. Hope everybody had a good Pesach. We were just sharing some stories about our Seders and stuff just before this. And so glad you're here and glad you're back joining us. It is officially afternoon, so I'll go with afternoon. Unless you're watching it in the morning on YouTube, in which case I'll say good morning to you, even though it's afternoon for us, whatever. Welcome back. Because we are now after Passover, but before Shavuot, that means we are in the special calendrical period called Sfirat HaOmer, or the counting of the Omer. Shavuot is a little bit unique in that if you look at all the descriptions in the Bible of the Hebrew calendar, the religious calendar, it'll say, the 15th day of the first month you shall not eat, you shall be a Pesach and you shall not eat chametz, fine. The first day of the 7th month is a day of remembering the Truah, fine. The 10th day of the 7th month is a day of atonement for you, great. It gives you dates, except for Shavuot. Shavuot, for those who know, the Torah tells us that you shall count 7 weeks of weeks, meaning how many?
49.
Huh?
49.
49. Good. Just testing your math skills. I told you guys before I hit record, I said there was going to be a pop quiz. I didn't tell you what it would be on. 49 days, and then you shall observe the Feast of Weeks, the Chag Shavuot. So it doesn't tell us the specific date of Shavuot in the Torah. It tells you it's 7 weeks after Pesach. And so it's a little bit of a unique holiday in that sense. It's also unique that of the major pilgrimage festivals, it is the only one that is not 7 days, according to the Torah. Shavuot is one, which opens up whole fun boxes of Pandora's in terms of in the Talmud. It opens up all sorts of conversations about, well, do we actually count it as 7 days because it's supposed to be like the others or not? How do we count it? What happens? But that's not where we're going today. Instead, we're going to look at a little bit at the spiritual side of Sfirat HaOmer, the counting of the Omer, courtesy of our Rebbe Levi Yitzchak of Berdichev. So, any questions before I commence? Before I put it up on the screen. Everybody good? By the way, just in case, for those of you who may be wondering or may not be certain, today is, anybody know?
14.
Good. Well done, Eddie. Chaim. Today is the 14th day of the Omer, which is 2 weeks, which means after sunset tonight, you can count the number that comes after 14. But I can't tell you what it is because then I'd be counting it and I can't count it ahead of time. So, halakha's fun. Welcome to the 14th day. So yes, let me put this up on the screen now and we'll learn a little bit from Reb Levi Yitzchak. Everybody see it? Everybody good? Excellent. Now, because he's working on Sfirat HaOmer, he doesn't actually start with a verse, but he is going to start with a question. So who wants to read the question for us?
I'll read that.
Go for it.
Okay. It seems necessary to explain why for each of the 16 mitzvot we recite Shekianu, but over the mitzvah of counting the Omer, we do not recite Shekianu.
Okay, good. So interesting question, which, I never really thought about until I read this teaching. When the first night of Passover, we sit down for the Seder, we do Kiddush, and we add Shehechianu at the end of it. Rosh Hashanah, when we first night, we do Shehechianu when we say Kiddush. The first time we do a mitzvah, the first time we do it, or first time we do it for a long time, we say Shehechianu. But we don't say Shehechianu for Sfirat HaOmer. So the obvious question is, why is that the case? Everybody understand the question? Okay.
Pillowcase I could do.
So Eddie, that was short. Why don't you read one more? After you and me, Dave.
This is discussed by R.E. Rabbi Isaac Luria on the verse, "You shall worship God on this mountain." It is known that when Israel was in Egypt, they had sunk to the 49th gate of impurity when the Holy Blessing One, with great mercy and kindness, redeemed them from Egypt in order to bring them closer under the wings of Shekinah, or God's presence. Because of this, it was necessary for them to count 7 clean weeks. For without 7 clean weeks, it would not be possible for them to come close under the wings of the Shekinah, as it is written.
Okay. So what's he saying?
Well, first I have a question. What is the 49th gate of impurity?
Great. This is something that comes up in the Midrash a few times, that keeps getting picked up in Hasidic thought. I was trying to, before class, I was trying to find the original source for it, and I could not find it anywhere. So I'm going to have to continue looking. The principal idea is that there are 50 gates of impurity, like 50 levels of impurity. And the Israelites had sank to the 49th of the 50 during their slavery in Egypt. And there's some implication in the Midrash that if they had sunk to the 50th, they would not have been able to be redeemed. As a kind of like Moses got them out just in time. I'm not sure it's worth dwelling too far on that, because I think it's more of a symbolic thing of how low the Israelites had fallen in their slavery in Egypt and how they were redeemed just in the nick of time before they wouldn't have been able to. But what does Kedushat Levi kind of go with it here?
Well, I mean, clearly the number 49 is important because it works out that they need 49 days to count the Omer.
Right. So I think that's a little bit of where he's going, is why is it 7 weeks of weeks? Why are we counting 49 days? Because each day represents a movement up out of that impurity and a movement out to get before they can stand in holiness at Mount Sinai. So that's kind of I think that's the way he's reading this, is that each day of the journey represents a spiritual move up the ladder in order to be able to accept the Torah at Mount Sinai as in a state of purity as God would want. Questions, comments, thoughts?
So, I mean, that's the Hasidic interpretation, but is that the general interpretation out there?
That's kind of, mostly where I've seen it is in Hasidic thought. There's a Midrash about it, but the Midrash doesn't really talk about that part as I recall. As I said, I couldn't really find the Midrash. I know it's out there because I've seen it before. I just can't remember where I've seen it, and I couldn't find it before class. If I find it, I will certainly let y'all know. But I don't think that's the point of that specific Midrash. I think it's more, the Midrash more focuses on Moses getting them out just in time. And now the rebbes, or in this case, Reb Levi Yitzchak, is reading it as, well, there's 49th gate of impurity and 49 days of travel that has to correlate properly. That can't be a coincidence. 49 is too unique of a number otherwise.
So that would go along with traditional conservative Judaic understanding of why we do 49 days of counting the Omer.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, there's also, the Torah tells us to count 7 weeks of weeks. I think he's just trying to understand, why does it give us that number? 49 is kind of an odd number. It's not a number that comes up frequently in the Bible. The Torah typically gives you numbers in multiples of 3 or 3 plus 1. Scholars are a little curious as to why they picked those multiples specifically, but if you think of numbers that come up, 7 days in a week is 3 times 2 plus 1. 10 commandments, 3 times 3 plus 1. 12 tribes is 3 plus 4, which in itself is 3 times parentheses 3 plus 1. 72 elders is multiple of 3. Like these things, and I think was it 13, right? No, I'm not good at math. 72 divided by 3, anybody? 24. There you go. 24 is 6 times 3. So these are, again, or 6 times 4, which again is 2 times 3. 3 plus 1. So like it all comes down to, like, it breaks down to 3s and 3 plus 1s, but nobody really understands why.
This is 16 times 3 plus 1.
Right. 60, right. It's 49 is just a weird number though to come up with. It doesn't, and even 50 is a little bit of an odd number in that scope because it doesn't fit into that paradigm, unless you read it as 7 weeks of weeks, because then 7 comes back as fine as 2 times 3 plus 1. But coming back to this, 49 is a weird number. So he's trying to understand, okay, if we have the 49th gate of impurity and we have these 49 days, that these are too unique of a number to not be related to each other. So that's where I think he's reading this as we're taking steps. Each day is a step out of a new level of impurity, raising ourselves higher, and purifying ourselves to be able to stand at Sinai in purity and receive the Torah. Other questions?
Yes, it's Shirley. I'm sorry, I sound like a froggy. I have allergies. But what's throwing me off is it was necessary for them to count 7 clean weeks. So is he saying that when they left Egypt that they were actually clean? Because if they're going to count the Omer, that is the actual cleaning process, I would think. So I'm just like being thrown off about this 7.
I think what he's saying is God would, they had sunk to the 49th gate of impurity when the Holy Blessing One with great mercy and kindness redeemed them from Egypt. Because of this, because of they were in the 49th level when they left Egypt, it was necessary for them to count 7 clean weeks in order to come under God's presence in purity. So they were not pure when they left Egypt.
Okay, so it's
But
the process of,
as you said, this is a cleansing process.
okay, thank you.
Other questions?
I mean, actually, what is the cleansing? I mean, because when we count, when we count the Omer, I mean, that's symbolic, but what were they actually doing other than fleeing the Egyptians?
Good.
Fleeing
So ritual, so let's break it. Narratively, they were traveling. So in the narrative, the 10th plague, the plague striking the firstborn in Egypt, happens on the night of the first Seder. And then Pharaoh kicks them out overnight, which means they left first thing in the morning on the first day of Pesach. And then the splitting of the Sea of Reeds happens on the 7th day of Pesach, of Passover, which is why, by the way, we read Shirat Hayam again on the 7th day of Passover. We read about it because according to tradition, that's when it happened, was on that 7th day of Passover. And then essentially they're in transit, en route, from there for the next 6 weeks to get to Sinai. So narratively, there's not, a ton going on right there. Even commentators struggle with it because, even things like the manna happens, I think, pretty soon after the splitting of the sea, but then you get Amalek, you get the story of Yitro, and the commentators are kind of divided whether or not that actually happened in sequence or if these stories are out of sequence for some reason. But narratively does not seem a lot happening. I think Amalek, Mana, Amalek, and Yitro, if you read it in sequence, is kind of the only things really happening. Spiritually, however, there's quite a bit going on in that, if you remember, now we're going to start getting into the Kabbalah part of this, is if you remember, how many sfirot are there? I'm going to pull down this the text for a moment. I'll pull up the spherotic chart, but this one looks good. Okay. Okay, I should have done it this way. Wait a second.
Isn't there a song that the day school kids sing about how many Sfirot and how many the books of the Torah? And isn't there a song? I don't know.
Might be. All right, so here's kind of the spherotic chart here on the right, the one that's a little bigger. If you count, there's how many?
11, 12, 3, 6, and that is 11.
Yeah, dot shouldn't be here. This is not a good chart.
It's 10.
Let's do this one. No, this one works. This one works a little better. If you look at this one, there's how many?
9. Without 3, 6.
Well, Shechina is 10. That's Malchut. Here we go. So there's 10 Sfirot. However, the top ones, Keter, Chochma, and Bina, or alternately in some structures, it's Chochma, Bina, and Dat, are kind of inaccessible. They are kind of they're kind of too high for us to reach, which means if you take those 3 out, how many are left?
7.
Good. Again, I told you this. I told you pop quiz. There's going to be. I didn't tell you what the pop quiz was. It's going to be a math quiz, apparently. I didn't even know what I was going to quiz you on, apparently. So 7 Sfirot, which we can influence by our actions according to Kabbalah. So, however, think of these as atoms in a sense. Within each sphera is this chart in miniature, so that there's kind of a sphera within each of the sphirot. Does that make, or a full tree within each sphera? Does that make sense? I'm seeing nodding, which is good, because this is hard to follow sometimes. So what are we doing now? Again, Keter Chochma Bina or Chochma Bina Dat are not really accessible, so that leaves 7, which means we have 7 sfirot within 7 sfirot. So often, sometimes what you'll see as people are counting is they will count it according to sfirot. So, for example, chesed bechesed, what is the kindness that is within kindness? Or gvura bechesed, what is the act of judgment that is within an act of within kindness? Or what is beauty within kindness? Or eternity, or splendor, or foundation? What are the different spherotic things that are tied within each sphera? And then after the first week, when you've gone through 7, you'll go do the next one. And then what's chesed b'gevura? What's a kindness that's within judgment, or a judgment within judgment, or a beauty within judgment, and so on and so forth. So each week you focus on a specific attribute and each of the other attributes that line up within it. And in that way, you get 7 times 7, and you work your way all the way through the sfirot, working your way up. I actually think you start with Malchut, but I usually don't count this way, so I have to remember. But in that way, it's kind of a spiritual progression through these days, paralleling in some ways the levels of impurity that the Israelites were coming out of each day. So in that sense, it's almost like a Musar would turn this into a tikkun hanefesh, into a soul repair, into working on yourself during these 49 days, and how can you fix these different attributes within yourself to spiritually improve yourself all the way up to Shavuot. That was a very long-winded answer, but did it actually answer your question, Cindy?
No. Maybe. I mean, so the Hasidim believe that as our people were trudging through the desert, they were going through this process. Is that what you were saying?
I think more so, they would say that the 49 days of travel that they were doing in the wilderness is symbolic of the spiritual journey that we need to be on during this period of time.
I like that. Okay, good. I'll go with that.
Not necessarily that the Israelites were doing it, but more that it's symbolic of the work that we're supposed to be doing. And the fact that they were doing it for 49 days helps us understand that these are the 49 steps that we need to be taking also.
Yes, now I got it. Thank you.
Other questions, comments? All right, so let's come back to our text here. So now we can come back. Now, I'm going to see if this works. No, it didn't. If you look at the verse that he cited, that Reb Levi Yitzchak cited, you shall worship God on this mountain. In the Hebrew, it's ta'avdun et ha-Elohim al ha-har hazeh. There's a nun that's at the end of ta'avdun. And I wish those are, you can kind of see it right here. I don't know if you can, like right in the middle there. You could the Torah could have said ta'avdu. You will serve, you will worship. But it adds a nun at the end. So now he's going to try to say, why is there this extra nun at the end? If somebody wants to read it. Don't all jump at once.
Are we starting with this is the interpretation?
Yes.
This is the interpretation of the verse. You shall worship God. It ends in noon. Noon, gematria equals 50. We're always waiting for when the counting will pass and we will arrive close to God. And always it is their desire to finish the counting of the Omer. And if it was possible, we would finish the counting of the Omer in one moment so we could begin to be close to God. Then how good and how pleasant it would be. This is why the Shekianu blessing is not relevant for this.
Okay. Everybody follow that?
Or
So what's he saying?
I mean, is he saying because we haven't been there before, we can't be thankful for reaching that day? I don't understand this.
Okay, you're close.
That usually when we say a blessing, perform a mitzvah, that mitzvah is in that moment. But in this case, we can't say it at the beginning because we've not completed the mitzvah. The completion of the mitzvah takes 49 days. So and that's where we arrive in holiness before God. And that is the mitzvah, is to arrive after the 49 days in holiness before God. So that's why we couldn't say the Shehachianu 49 days ago, because we hadn't done the mitzvah yet.
Good. Like, this is what he's saying is Shehechianu is as Cindy said, it's for the moment. When you say Shehechianu, like you're putting on tefillin for the first time, and you say Shehechianu, it's because you're doing it in the mitzvah. You're fulfilling the mitzvah in that moment. When you're saying kiddush, you're fulfilling the mitzvah in that moment. Now,
Did you hear that, Barbara?
But for the Omer, it's not a single moment. What are we doing? We're journeying, we're traveling, we're moving forward, we're raising ourselves up spiritually, and we haven't actually completed the process. We're trying to get as spiritually elevated as we can, and arrive as close to God as we can. But to do that, like Cindy said, we need to finish the Omer. So we can't say Shehechianu on the first day of the Omer, because we're not anywhere close to what our goal is, to accomplishing the feat. We're only starting the journey. And I love this. If it was possible, by the way, I reread this I proofread this like 3 times and I still had a typo in it. So that's what happens. But if it was possible, we would finish the counting of the Omer in one moment so that we could begin to be close to God. Like, we'd love to just say the Omer, we'd love to count one day of the Omer and be done with it, because then we're like right there and close to God, but we're not. We have work to do and we have a journey to take. But because that we're in the process of this journey, we don't say Shehechianu because we haven't actually completed the fulfillment of the mitzvah. When is actually the fulfillment of the mitzvah?
49 today, a son, a count.
No, when we get to Shavuot on the 50th day. That's why the Ta'avdun ends in Nun, because it symbolizes the 50th day is actually the completion when you get to Shavuot. And what do we do on Shavuot? We say Kiddush and Shehechianu, because now we've made it to the goal, and now we've made it to the holiday. We've made it to the evening of receiving the Torah. So now we can say Shehechianu. Questions, comments, thoughts?
The way I was thinking about it is, when you say the Shekianu for your birthday, if you've had 49 birthdays, you're really going to appreciate the 50th birthday. So saying it means more to you at that point.
So yes, And if you think of it in that sense, what are you doing when you on your birthday? What are you doing? You're thanking God for the completion of the last year and being able to arrive at this moment, which means you've completed something. You've completed the act of another cycle around the sun. But we haven't completed anything yet. We're still in process, we're still in transit, we're still in growth. So we can't say Shehechianu because we haven't finished anything yet. We're still working on it. We're still journeying.
Are there any other situations where the recitation of Shehechianu it's like postponed like this?
I can't really think of anything offhand. And I suspect, because Reb Levi Yitzchak was smarter than me, that if there was, he probably would have brought it up. So I think that's one of the kind of the interesting things he's doing here, is it's not actually about the Bible, and he doesn't even bring a verse into this. What is he doing? He's taking a piece of halakha and turning it into a spiritual moment. He's taking the practice of halakha and interpreting it in a spiritual sense, which is a really beautiful way to do it.
When you say taking halakha, the counting of the Omer?
Or at least the lack of recitation of Shehechianu as part of that halachic structure of the Omer, yes.
But I think it also brings a more spiritual component to the actual counting of the Omer, more mindfulness to thinking about each day, not just, okay, we're one day closer to Shavuot. I made it another day, but like thinking of it as an opportunity every single day to do whatever one needs to do to clean up their act, like the Israelites coming out of Egypt, clean up your act so that you in this day, in this time, we're supposed to be like, we're receiving the Torah every time that we do this, and to remember that this is another opportunity to clean up our acts to become closer to God.
Beautiful. Beautiful. And I want to add to it is that, how do we count? Right? We say today's the first day, then we say today's the second day, then it's the third day, and we count all the way up. Usually, think of like New Year's Eve, right? What do? We say 50, 49, 48, 47. We count down to when something happens.
Right.
But we don't. We're counting up. Why? Because as we go back to Hanukkah, Ma'alin b'kodesh v'lo yordin. We ascend in holiness, we don't descend. So every day we move up a step. We ascend ourselves a little holier, ideally, rather than counting ourselves down. We're counting ourselves up as a way of moving ourselves holier and ascending higher each day.
It seems like the last few midrashim that we've been discussing shows how much work is involved in being Jewish. I mean, I'm not sure if it's to be a good Jew, but at least to be Jewish. And I was wondering in a conversion class, when you're working with converts, whether this is a good example of the kind of work that you need to do to become Jewish.
So would I necessarily teach this to a Midrash class? Probably not like this. I would probably tell them that, it's supposed to be a spiritual journey and a spiritual time in which you're trying to improve yourselves to get holier on your way to receiving the Torah at Mount Sinai. You got to build them up to be able to get to that point. But yes, it takes a lot of work to be Jewish. And I gave this sermon, actually, I think it was the Shabbat after Pesach, is that, yes, it's a lot of work, and relationships are a lot of work. It takes a lot of work to make a successful relationship, as those of us who are married can attest. And as they say in Pirkei Avot, according to the work is the reward. So the more work you put into it, the more effort you put into it, the more you get out of it. So the more you try to focus on your spiritual life and your Jewish life, then the more you're able to connect and build that relationship. And Judaism ultimately is about relationship. It's about our relationship with God and the terms of that relationship. Mitzvot are essentially the terms of that relationship. Just as, being faithful to your spouse, taking out the trash, cooking, cleaning, those are terms of our marital relationships. Mitzvot are the terms of our spiritual relationships. And yes, it takes work and it takes effort, but that's also how you build a successful relationship and how you feel connected to your religion, and to God. It doesn't just happen by magic.
And I will add a little editorial comment here that in my experience, it's oftentimes people that are born Jews rather than people who are Jews by choice that need a reminder of the more you put into the relationship, as you said, Rabbi, the more you get out of it.
Yes. Yeah, on some level, we think, us native born Jews, I think, have some level of expectation, right? Like, we're already Jewish, so we don't need to put in the effort. Whereas somebody who chose to be Jewish, there's a different level of passion and energy and psychological motivation, because they chose this life, they wanted this life, and now they've achieved what they wanted, and they want to live that out. Whereas for some of us natural born Jews, it's a little harder because we were born into it, so we take it for granted a little bit. So yes, I agree. Other questions, comments, thoughts? Well, kol hakavod to y'all. Thank you for learning together today. Next week, same Beit Midrash time, same Beit Midrash channel.
Thanks, Rabbi.
To watch Batman.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody. Be well.
Thank
If I don't see you before then, Shabbat Shalom. If I don't see you after then, have a good week, and looking forward to seeing y'all soon. Take care, everybody. Be well.
Take care.